months ago, in fact, the 19th of August was the 14th month anniversary, because I'm still at that stage, my husband died. And we had been together for 38 years. He was my soulmate. He was my best friend. We ran our business together. We did everything together. He was my life. And he died. And he was 21 years older than me. So he was 81 when he died. We knew it was coming. We were prepared for it. And he chose to die. I have never before watched someone consciously withdraw their life force and leave. And he did it over a period of a couple of days. So with the work that I do with my spiritual beliefs, I was prepared for all of this. I always knew, because of our age difference, that we weren't going to grow old together. I always knew I would have a life after John. And everybody, when he died, they all said to me, my friends were saying, you're so amazing and you're so strong and you're handling it so well. And I bought into that. At the same time that he died, we had just sold our farm and he left me to do all the packing. 22 and a half years of our life, I had to pack up literally immediately after his funeral. Packed up, moved to my new home, where I am now, where I'm sitting with my animals. Absolutely love it here. I believed that I could avoid grief, or at least that grief that people get when they suddenly lose someone and it's a huge shock. And I'll always be grateful that that hasn't been my experience. But boy, was I wrong. Grief hit me like a tsunami at the most unexpected of times. I could go for days being busy, building my business now that he had gone. And it was one of the gifts that he gave me, was being able to focus on building this business. Building this, opened a bank account, registered a business, got sorted in my new home. It took months and months of downsizing and clearing out so many years of clutter. And there were days that I couldn't get out of bed. There were days when I couldn't function. And I couldn't understand why, because in my mind, I wasn't grieving. I could handle this. I knew he had to go. I knew he was in a better place. I knew that he was tired. I knew it was his time. But this grief kept knocking me down and catching me unawares. And it was months later when I realized that I felt like I was treading water, like I was going nowhere slowly, that it began to dawn on me that actually I was grieving. And I began to pay more attention to how I was feeling. I would wake up literally every day and go, how am I feeling today? And what am I able to do? And it's because of this process, and it's because of the processes that some of my friends are going through now in this time of lockdown and the coronavirus, which have been so different, that really got me to take a closer look at this grief process and how we are around death and dying. And it's a subject that I've always been interested in. It's not one that I've ever spoken about before. This is the first time. You were the first people to actually hear me give a talk about grief, and grief in the time of Corona. So why should it be any different? I mean, grief is grief. Grief is always around us. We're always losing people, pets, friends, loved ones. We've always had these struggles. And I think the hardest struggle we have with grief is we don't know how to be around it, and we don't know how to do it because we've never wanted to look at it. But when I look back over the last year, and I look back over the last 6 months of Corona, what I've realized is we have to pay attention to grief if we actually want to move forward with our lives. I had to stop. My problem was I wasn't stopping and allowing myself to grieve. If I stopped for too long, one of the things that happened was I would start to feel guilty. And I know that, there's all the lists of the anger and the denial and the acceptance, the process that you go through, the shock of when you lose someone. I didn't expect to feel the guilt. And the guilt came because I'm alive and I'm living the life that John and I always dreamed of. We spoke about it. Once we'd sold the farm, we had a lot of financial challenges before we sold. We sold the farm. That was going to solve our problems. We'd found the place that I'm living in, we'd already found and signed the lease for. And it was like John knew I was going to be okay. And when he knew I was going to be okay, then he chose to go. So I would feel guilty because I have this amazing life now and he's not here to enjoy it. And I've had to make peace with that. I've had to make peace with the fact that there are times when still 14 months later, grief hits me like a ton of bricks. I'll suddenly just think of something. And so there's this pain, there is this heart pain. I always say that it's the space in my heart that John occupies. And sometimes it hurts like hell. And I've had to go through this process in the last year of realizing that none of us are immune from grief. The problem is that we don't actually stop long enough to acknowledge that we're grieving. Now you throw Corona and lockdown into the mix, and it becomes that much more challenging because Corona has brought grief on so many levels in so many different ways. Besides losing people, you've got the loss of jobs, you've got the loss of livelihoods, you've got the loss of businesses, you've got the loss of relationships. A lot of relationships, in South Africa, we were in hard lockdown for 5 weeks. That means everything was closed except essential services. So if you were in a crappy relationship before lockdown, believe me, it was going to get a lot worse. So a lot of relationships didn't survive lockdown. Our routines, we grieve the loss of routines. Just phoning up a friend and going, let's go out for coffee or let's go out for a drink. Grieving the loss of plans and dreams and goals. Here in South Africa, we have the last year of school is known as the matric year. I think in America, you have prom night. Here it's the matric farewell. All of that is gone. Graduations, online, everything became virtual and there was not that connection. So we have that grief. And initially with lockdown, our way of dealing with it was to make jokes about it. How many things could you find to occupy yourself during lockdown? But none of us really acknowledged how we were feeling. And then you also throw in the fear. So you've got fear and grief. And what do? We suppress it. We push it down into the body. We go, I'm fine. I'm coping. That's what I was doing. So you have all those layers of grief that you're trying to process, sometimes without even realizing it. And it comes up in ways of being irritable, not being able to sleep, being depressed. I went through all of those after John died, not realizing that they were grief. I just thought, well, I'm in a new house, I'm getting settled, there's all these changes, I'm dealing with the estate. But actually now I see that I was grieving. we don't mourn enough in Western society. You know, and I've been reading up, I've just been doing some research on other cultures of the world. And many of the indigenous cultures, they honor the death process in the life cycle. My friend who is Jewish told me that in their culture, I mean, besides the fact that they really mourn at the graveside, you know, they tear their shirts, they cover the mirrors, they wail. In the African culture, I know that years and years ago, our domestic worker, her mother died. Her mum worked for my mum, her daughter works for me. We went to her funeral. This was in the apartheid years in South Africa. So there we were, my mum and dad, my husband and I, the only 4 whites in a township at a funeral. And I remember Dinah throwing herself on her mother's grave, wailing and weeping and just really just letting this emotion out. We don't do that. We have the funeral, and it's like when John died, everyone was with us. The kids came down, his sister came down, my best friend was there the day he passed, my best friend was there. We're all together, and everyone is doing something. They're feeding, they're getting drinks, we're organizing funeral. Everybody wants to help, and you have the funeral, and everybody comes, and everybody's part of it. And you have the tea afterwards, or the wake, or whatever it is. And you remember, and you cry, and you mourn. And then everybody leaves. And they go back to their lives, and that's like, okay, that's that. Now you move on. And that's often the hardest time for someone who's lost a loved one, or a life partner, or a parent. Because now everyone else has gone back to what they know is normal. But for that bereaved person, this is a new normal. They have to find a new space in the world. And it doesn't matter how, like for me, who's independent, who's responsible, who's been used to doing all these things for myself. I was always the responsible one. I took care of the home, took care of our business, took care of my mother. But suddenly now, my mum's in an old age home. Nobody really needs me. I've got to create a new life for myself. And it can be quite daunting. And I have a wonderful network of friends, but I'm also very aware that they have their own lives. So I've had to sort of work this space out for myself, and I've struggled at times. So goodness knows how people feel who don't have maybe the support network that I'm fortunate enough to have. And I've had to get through this grief process with no manual, and there is no manual with grief. It doesn't matter how many times they tell you what the process is. A, there's no time frame, and B, there's no real manual to tell you how to deal with it. So if you are someone who is going through the process, what I can tell you is to take it a day at a time. Just take it a day at a time. 1 foot sometimes, 1 breath at the time is all you can manage, and that's okay. It really is okay. And the other challenge that we have in the Western society is people around us don't know how to be around someone who's suffered loss. And I've heard stories of women particularly who've lost husbands, and suddenly every friend, every couple they were friends with, drops them like a hot potato. They don't know what to do with a single person. People will cross over the street so they can avoid seeing you because they don't know what to say. So if you're around someone who has lost someone, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to fix. You can't fix anything. No one can fix that loss. No one can make it better. There's no way around this. And Heather was so right in what she said here. We want it to be easy and light. And grief is not easy and light. It is messy, and it is raw. And it is You feel broken. There are times when you feel broken. And what I've realized is that what COVID has done is it's taken away a lot of the familiar rituals. And human beings, we are creatures of habit. And we are very big on our rituals. And the rituals around death are very, very important. And they're important for one reason: closure. And COVID has taken that away. And there's a story that I heard a few weeks ago that has haunted me ever since. And one of my good friends was telling me that a friend of hers, her husband, went into hospital just before lockdown. Literally, as lockdown started, we started at the end of March, he had to go into hospital and he was really ill. And she wasn't allowed to see him. And he kept phoning her and begging, eventually begging. This went on for 5 weeks, saying, I know I'm not well. I don't think I'm going to get through this. I need to see you. I think this is the end. I think I'm afraid I'm going to die. These pleading phone calls. And the hospital refused point blank to let her visit him. And after 5 weeks, he died. And she didn't get to see him. And after he died, the hospital phoned her and asked her to come and collect his belongings. And then she was allowed into the hospital. And this story just haunts me. When did we lose our compassion and our kindness that we won't let a wife see her husband before he dies? And, you can make a plan. I'm sorry, you can make a plan just for those few moments when you know that there is no hope and the person is going to die. She is absolutely racked with guilt. She's going through hell because she didn't get to say goodbye. And another friend of mine, her husband suffered from asthma. He had an asthma attack and really was struggling to breathe. So the ambulance came and fetched him. She kissed him goodbye on the Friday. Obviously, now we're well into lockdown, so she can't go with him. Kissed him goodbye, and she said to me after, she said, I didn't even kiss him properly. You make a joke, peck on the cheek, and he died 24 hours later in hospital alone. And it was so unexpected and such a shock. And again, there was no closure. She didn't know it was coming. The hospital didn't phone to say, look, we think you should come. There was nothing until she got the phone call he had died. That is huge. It is absolutely huge. And she's also, 7 weeks later, she is still in a numb state. She really is struggling to function. So Corona has taken away those rituals. Here in South Africa, still, funerals, you can only have 50 people. It's limited, it's the family and really, really close friends. The rest of everyone else has to watch via Zoom. So you don't have the connection. When my husband died, he was very active in the church. He was well known in the community. That Catholic church was packed. When we stood up as a family to give the eulogies, I was shocked at how many people were there. I was shocked at the people who drove down from the town that we used to live in 20 years ago, 330 kilometers away, who had driven down for the day to attend the funeral. That's what we're missing at the moment, is that show of respect. And it has a big impact. We have people here in White River, in the town that I live in, their son, who was in his 30s, died of lung cancer some years ago, about 4 years ago now, just before Christmas. The family never had a funeral. They never had a memorial service in the town. They took his ashes and they scattered them on the game farm that they own further north. They've never had a funeral for him. And you can see that something is missing. There's two parts to this. A, the town never got to show their love and respect for the family and for the son who had died. They never got that chance. And the mother and the father, there's like it's unfinished. And this is a huge thing. You know, when you go to funerals and people stand up and they say all these wonderful things about the person who's died. And I went to the funeral of the father of good friends of mine, the husband's father died. And the grandchildren had written this beautiful, they put together this beautiful printed book of what he had meant to them and the legacy that he had left them. And my one thought was, I wish they'd given it to him when he was alive, maybe for his birthday. He was well into his 70s when he died. And he died unexpectedly after a minor op. But I want, give it to him while he's alive. But we need to do these things. It's part of the ritual. And now in COVID, all of that is gone. You don't get to see the people. You don't get to have the conversations. You don't get to be there when they die. My biggest regret in life is when my dad died 20 years ago. I went home 2 days earlier before he died. He was already in a coma. We knew he was going to die. We knew it was a matter of time, but I needed to get back to work. And I will regret that till the day I die, that I didn't stay for those extra 2 days. And my sister regrets not staying at the hospital. My dad died about 5 o'clock in the morning. And she will tell you she regrets to this day not waiting at his bedside. And a couple of years later, we actually found out that someone else in Hermanus, where he died, down in the Cape, they knew someone here in White River. They went and sat with my dad, reading him passages from the Bible. And they were there when he died, so he wasn't alone. So all these things are going on in our mind. They die alone. We never got to have the conversations. We can't go to the funeral. We can't get that closure we need to close that cycle of their life. I got to do all that last year. I can't imagine how I would have coped this year under the lockdown conditions that we're still in South Africa. We're in level 2 at the moment. So we still have things, funerals and that, and they've just opened interprovincial travel, but there's no international travel. So people from overseas can't get here. They have to watch via Zoom. And human connection is so important at those times. That's what brings us together in these rituals of the weddings and the christenings and the births and the pregnancies. It's that sense of human connection. We need that. And Corona has taken that away. So we suppress all of this. We're suppressing all of this in this time. This grief and this unknown that is facing us. This is not a new normal. This is a transition. And transitions are scary and they're messy. And we're grieving on so many levels. And this is the time that we need to reach out so that we can share how we're feeling. It's not for someone to fix it for us. That's not what this is about. It's for someone to listen, to hold the space. Heather Plett, she really put this phrase, holding space. She's just written a book now about holding space. But we need to hold the space for the people so they can grieve. We also need to create new rituals. And we can still do it, even in the time of Corona. We can still do it. You know, one of the things I realized, my wedding anniversary is the 21st of April. So this year we would have been married 31 years. And one of the things I realized was that John and I never had a conversation when he died. He basically, on the Saturday, he had pneumonia, his heart was compromised, he was very tired, and I made a joke and said, listen, in sickness and in health, I looked after your mum, I looked after my mum, I looked after my dad, I'm practicing to take care of you. And he looked at me straight in the eye and he said, babes, I'm done. I'm done. And he stopped taking his meds and he closed his eyes. Because if he couldn't look after me, he wasn't going to have it the other way around. And in typical John fashion, because he did everything his own way, he closed his eyes and he withdrew from the world. He withdrew his life force. That's the way I would put it. Very peaceful at home. It was beautiful to watch. And the kids came. Everyone was there. He was not going to open his eyes. Even when they tried to wet his lips with ice chips, he turned his head away. And he died. And he and I never had a conversation. And I realized this in April, that this was an incomplete. I never got to say the things that I needed to say. And we'd been married a long time. We had lots of problems, but we had a very special relationship. But it was very challenging, and it had been challenging in the year before. And I never got to have a conversation with him. So here's what I did. On our wedding anniversary, and we got married in court because he was a Catholic and he was divorced, so we couldn't do the church thing then. At 11, I wrote him a letter. And I said all the things that I never got to say. And at 11 a.m., which is the time we got married, I poured myself a glass of bubbly. I got our wedding photo and our wedding album, and I played Frank Sinatra because that was the music we danced to, and I burnt the letter. And it was amazing. And I just sat there and I just remembered. I remembered that day when we got married and all the memories. And it was incredible how much peace it brought me. You can create your own rituals. If you are going through a time, because and I don't know what it is like in your country, but here the old age homes are in lockdown, which is the worst thing for old people, not having that connection. My mum's in an old age home, literally 5 minutes from me. I didn't see her for 9 weeks. Then they allowed a few visits. And then when we started our spike, they went back into hard lockdown, and I haven't seen her now since July. You can't see them. You may have parents that you've lost in this time, and it's like you weren't there, or you couldn't be there. But you can still remember them, and don't underestimate the power of prayer and intention. And if you ever follow or watched any of Greg Braden's videos, he tells a wonderful story of, they did an experiment of a husband who was very ill with cancer. I think it was cancer. It was a long time since I've seen the video, but I just remember this story. And so they put the husband in a room, completely soundproof, separate from his wife, and they hooked him up to machines to see how his body would respond. And in another room, they got his wife to pray and hold him in the energy of healing, and just seeing him as well, and just sending him love. And he never knew when she was going to start doing this. The researchers just said, okay, now you will start praying or do whatever you want to do. See your husband as well and healed and whole. And the moment she started doing this, his body responded. It reacted. They've done similar tests with DNA, that they've taken someone's DNA and put it in a laboratory, and 300 miles away or kilometers away is the actual person whose DNA it is. And the moment they stimulate the person, that DNA reacts instantaneously, and it's hundreds of miles away. So you can create your own rituals now. If you are going through loss or you're about to lose someone, you can sit with your family with a circle, light a candle, have photos of the person, and literally hold the intention of bringing them into that space. Talk about them. Share your memories. Talk to them almost at a soul level. Say to them, we are here. We are with you. You are not alone. There's more than enough research being done to know that that connection, that soul connection, that intention, that heart connection, you can almost imagine your heart connecting with their heart and just tell them, we are here. You are not alone. Because people are afraid to die. I know my mum is just, it's an existence. She can't speak anymore. She doesn't really understand what's going on. She's in nappies. Got another good friend, I was chatting to her yesterday, same thing. Her mother just wants to die. But she also hasn't seen her kids that live far away. And that will keep her holding on. So lockdown has taken that away from us. It's taken those opportunities to have that closure. And closure is hugely, hugely important for us. And the rituals. So can you find new rituals? Can you find ways to allow your feelings? Because Heather's right, in the Western society, we just we get uncomfortable around emotion. You know, I always say most of us, we function from here up. We go, I'm fine. I might be freaking insecure, neurotic, and emotional, but I'm fine. We ignore what the body is holding. We ignore that grief. And when we ignore those kinds of heavy emotions, eventually our body, you know, it's like a pressure cooker. And the body just can't take it anymore. And that's when you start getting the dis-ease, the illnesses, you know, the blood pressure, the strokes, the diabetes. If you look at Louise Hay, diabetes is when the joy is taken out of life. And you know, the diabetes, blood pressure, strokes, cancer, they're all skyrocketing because we suppress so much and we're grieving so much on so many levels now, and we don't know what to do with it. And we don't know what to do with the people who are struggling with it. But actually, you know, you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to have any special skill. You don't have to know what to say. And it's okay to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here. Thank goodness I have friends that I know I can just send them a quick WhatsApp going, I'm struggling. That's all I need them to know is I'm struggling. And they'll go, do you want us to come round? And I go, no, I'm okay. I just need you to know that, you know, I'm having a bit of a struggle here. If I need you, I'll tell you. But we need to know that that is received and not sort of, oh, you know, what do you want me to do about it? So you don't have to do anything. If you know someone who is going through struggle, just hold that space for them to go through whatever it is that they need to go through. Open your heart. We've lost, on so many levels, we've lost that heart connection. And also, if you have lost someone, I mean, I don't have children. I have stepchildren and step-grandchildren and step-great-grandchildren. I married a good Irishman, very busy. But I haven't had a child. I don't know what it's like to lose a child. And it's not something you ever get over. You know, and this is the problem, that when we don't know what to say, we often end up saying the wrong things, like, oh, you know, they're in a better place now, or it was God's will, or it was meant to be. You just don't even say stuff like that, because you don't know that that's true. You don't know where they are. And the point is, they have left someone behind who is struggling, and they are the ones that need our love and our care. And especially now, when everything has been, when we have been so separated, even hugging. You shouldn't hug people. You shouldn't touch them. And, that's what we need. We're humans. It's that human touch. The power of hugs boosts the serotonin, but we can't hug. So we have to find other ways, and we have to find other ways to cope. But the biggest thing is to allow the feelings and to be honest about how we're feeling. Even now, I will accept an invitation, and then I'll go, listen, I might change my mind on the day. It depends how I feel. And there are some things I still can't do. I can't go to a fancy event where we all dress up and the men wear their tuxedos and their black ties, because my husband loved that. It's still too raw, and that's okay. So find your new rituals. Reach out to those who are struggling. We just need to know that you're there. Understand that there is no closure a lot of the time in this time of Corona. We can't get that closure. Allow your feelings and know that nothing lasts forever. Value and appreciate what you have while you have it. The Tibetan Book of the Dead says that you should live every day as if it was your last. And when I said that to someone, they went like, oh, that's creepy, that's morbid. But when you think about it, it isn't. Would we not live life more fully if we knew that this was going to be our last day? Would we not make the most of every single second? There used to be one of the banks here had an advert, and it said, if you knew this was your last day on earth, we bet you wouldn't be spending it in the office. So just take some time to pay attention to what's going on in here, and to grief that you may be feeling at this strange new world we find ourselves in, and the many things that we've lost over the past months. Because nothing lasts forever. But what we have is incredibly special. And yes, as Heather says, it gets messy and it gets raw. But that's what being a human being is all about. Thank you for your time. I'm just going to open the Q&A. This is a whole new thing for me. And if there's any questions, let me know. Thank you, Rochelle.